that given the backdrop of a deepening and broadening global recession, we believe that Canada has entered a recession.
So Canada did enter a recession. This is contradictory from what he's saying in 2025, where he saved Canada from a recession. And we're going to have a listen to more about what he's saying about this a little bit more. And I'm going through these videos because we know so very little of Mark Carney. And it just seems what's coming out of his mouth is either a lie or deception or gaslighting. And I think he's just following the Trudeau or the Liberal playbook because it worked for him. Welcome back to the A News Network. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Let's have a listen to Mark Carney.
It may be individually rational for people to want to save more and for businesses to invest less during uncertain economic times. However, if this behavior is widespread, it becomes collectively irrational. Fear of recession feeds recession. Similarly, a bank may decide to hoard capital in anticipation of increased loan losses during a slowdown. If all banks do the same, their actions will exacerbate the downturn and increase the eventual losses. Exercising. The third risk that I'm going to talk, third and final risk that I'd like to address that was covered in the FSR relates to the health of Canadian household balance sheets. Household credit makes up about 60% of the Canadian banking sector's total loan exposure, so clearly changes in the health of Canadian household balance sheets has an important impact on capital adequacy and profitability institutions. And while the Canadian household sector has remained relatively healthy, its resilience will be tested during the recession. Now,
what is your outlook for the Canadian loonie?
The outlook for the economy. Our outlook is, as we said with our last decision, is that given the backdrop of a deepening and broadening global recession, we believe that Canada has entered a recession with this quarter, and that it will persist into 2009 with a modest recovery in the back end of 2009 and then strengthening in 2010.
He does mention again the recession in Canada, and I'm only bringing this up because he said he saved Canada from the recession. So this, once again, his words are opposite, and this is perfect for a Liberal, and Trudeau does the same thing, says one thing and his actions are different on the other end. And I don't think we all appreciate what Stephen Harper did to protect Canada from the recession at that time. And back then, I must admit too, there wasn't smartphones, there wasn't TikTok, there wasn't a way to socialize that as much. So even this video is an archive and is pretty old, but it just shows to you that Mark Carney is not telling the truth. And the more we know about him, the more of coming out is a lie, and he's fabricating it. And I guess when he got the job in England after, he was a great talker. Maybe now they're going to look at it and say, you know, this guy maybe is full of crap. What's going on? Let's continue because he is talking more about the recession. He brings it up in Canada.
Would need to raise a combined $1.2 trillion US to bring their leverage ratios down to Canadian levels. And these capital needs will obviously rise one for one with any recession-induced write-downs in those jurisdictions. Now, in the current environment, banks are inclined to hoard capital rather than deploy it. But in a world with government guarantees, liquidity, and funding support, regulators should not reinforce this tendency. In Canada, our banks are not facing the same pressures to delever as their counterparts are abroad. Still, their loan portfolios would experience higher credit losses in a deep or prolonged downturn. That's obvious. The risk identified in the FSR is that the capital markets force banks to maintain higher capital ratios than necessary to guard against the possibility of an even worse economic outcome. This could lead banks to slow balance sheet growth, which would tighten lending conditions to both households and businesses and weaken our economy. Ultimately, the financial institutions themselves and their shareholders would suffer from this self-fulfilling prophecy. To correct this problem over the medium term, the bank is working internationally to examine how the current regulatory capital framework may amplify fluctuations in economic and financial conditions. Under current rules, capital requirements are closely linked to credit risk in an institution's portfolio. In an upturn, risk goes down, banks are required to hold less capital, and growth of credit increases. The problem is that this can amplify swings in financial condition and lead to the emergence of financial imbalances, and you recall the link I made between credit growth and future financial stress a moment ago. On the other hand, during a downturn when credit risk increases, banks are required to hold, on a regulatory basis, increased capital, and this exacerbates the economic weakness and financial stress. So this is the motivation for proposals to have capital requirements move procyclically. Banks could be required to build up capital buffers during times of rapid credit expansion. This would strengthen their balance sheets and reduce the risk that financial imbalances will develop from overly easy financial conditions. During a downturn, banks could then draw down these buffers, which would reduce the need to liquidate assets or restrict loan growth at a time when credit conditions and asset prices are already under stress. In this way, capital requirements would moderate the ups and downs of the credit cycle and the economic cycle, the reverse of what is currently happening. This macroprudential approach to capital requirements is tremendously important, which is why I'm belaboring the point this afternoon. But it's also very complex. It requires a number of, it raises a number of practical and logistical concerns. Such a system could be accomplished by linking capital requirements to movements in credit cycle indicators, such as loan growth and asset prices. And recall the example of our research on financial stress. That could help inform the development of these guidelines. But it's probably unrealistic to think that ex ante we can develop the perfect formula. In fact, it's dangerous to think that ex ante we can develop the perfect formula to smooth these fluctuations. So ultimately, there are important questions regarding the balance of rules, formulae, and discretion, and regarding the latter, discretion